side of the spectrum from most of the people in the Occupy movement. I was screaming about it when they were doing it. I was like, this is wrong.
What was wrong that you say?
Well, the brutality, the way they kettled you guys, they tear gassed you, they did. I mean, I don't know if that was going on where you were, but I was seeing that in New York. I was seeing it all over.
Straight up legislated out. So at the time I was in Nashville, so they didn't even use the brutality methods on us. This is how insidious they can do. So for anybody listening that says, oh, well, why do the people in Seattle and that? First of all, we've been peaceful in Seattle this entire time.
Mm-hmm.
We've been peaceful. All the pretty much 97% of the stuff that's popped off is literally stuff that's been done to us.
Mm-hmm.
So all that's being reported is nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
Can tell you that for a fact is nonsense. People only come when things are sensationalized.
Mm-hmm.
So in Nashville, what happened in 2012, I'm in college at the time, and out in downtown Nashville. Now, before I was there, in October 2011, right, they had pretty much, the police department had got people about the way. People had been pouring in for like 5 months. Fast forward to March 2012. People had been on what is called Legislative Plaza. It's across the street from the state capitol building, up on this palatial estate. Downtown Nashville had this palatial estate of a courthouse. Things looked beautiful, right? People were, for the most part, being peaceful, not for the most part harassing passersby, those who were working there. Now, understand, we had support. There was college students, you had lawyers, doctors, you name it. Everybody was looking together. Homeless folks, everybody was coming together. There are other issues why occupiers failed, but in this specific situation, now, God bless the governor, because the governor actually vetoed this law ordinance or whatever. I'd never seen one get moved so fast through the system. When they want to, they'll move it fast. Mm-hmm. And I've never seen one so targeted. Pretty much the bill that got passed was saying that you couldn't camp, that you couldn't have any sort of things in that specific location. Within 2 days, Legislative Plaza was cleared out. They legislated us out. Forget First Amendment rights. Forget right to peaceful assembly. Forget public land. They legislated it out. So for all the people that say, oh, why don't you guys just listen to them? We do, or try to, right?
Mm-hmm.
May Day 2016 in Seattle, where they completely quarantined us all. Mm-hmm. And did just brutalization tactics, where they marched regular citizens 2 miles down the road, where they threaten multiple arrests. During these times where they've arrested multiple people, let them out because they don't have any actual things. Or a lot of us have been gassed, brutalized, you name it.
Mm-hmm.
False arrests where myself has been surrounded by 8 officers, stole my knife on me. And there's so many other things that I could make. When the city of Seattle refused to respond to medical emergencies and more that I could get into.
Okay. I missed the last word you said there.
Oh, I said when the city of Seattle failed to respond to medical emergencies, failed to protect property, which, you know, there's more I could get into.
Wow. Okay.
Stuff that doesn't actually get covered. Yeah.
Let me turn you up a little bit. Okay.
Thus far, we have not burned down buildings. Cars ain't really gone up in flames. Bodies haven't been dropped anymore. Things could be way worse.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what people don't understand that, though.
Okay.
But, you know, folks love to talk about the American Revolution, and we're free and we're independent. But they don't want to talk about the real stuff, that over 10 years that led to that point. And they don't want to talk about property destruction in the Boston Tea Party, which was worth millions of pounds at the time. They don't want to talk about that. They don't want to talk about the Civil War. They don't want to talk about the Battle of the Alamo, the War of 1812, the labor strikes, which all led to death, Civil Rights Movement, the Black Panthers, and more.
Mm-hmm.
Protest is as American can get, and all of it ends up in bloodshed. Everybody's like, oh, Dr. King, da-da-da. They don't even understand what Dr. King was talking about.
Okay. And what was he talking about?
Well, for one, he was talking about freedom of his people, just like Malcolm X was. Mm-hmm. Dr. King, if you actually go back and listen to him, was in support of the African republics. Dr. King, yes, it wasn't that he wasn't for nonviolence, because of a moral issue, but it was also because it was an intelligent tactic. You got to understand that at the time, Black Americans didn't have the firepower, the manpower, the resources, the economic, political, social, and cultural power to even stand up. They would have been massacred. Look at Tecumseh when the Native Americans tried to stand up together and band together. We see what happened there.
When was that? I don't actually know.
During the War
I
of
don't know what
1812.
happened at Tecumseh.
Yeah, Tecumseh during the War of 1812.
Oh, okay. And the Indians tried to revolt while the war was going on?
No, they were a part of it. They tried to band together and form their own nation.
Ah.
Yep.
Okay. And they were massacred again?
Some were, but pretty much once Tecumseh was killed off, and people were like, oh, where are your leaders? And where is your organization? Every time there are leaders, they kill them off. They assassinate them.
Oh, yeah.
Every time.
Yeah, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, who was the guy who did the Black Star Line, the cruise ships? He wanted to go back to Africa. What the heck was his name?
I'm trying to remember which one.
Yeah. Well, there was a guy I actually read a book about him in jail. Let me Google Black Star Line. But yeah, they certainly do that, and the drug war has been a big part of that too.
Oh, absolutely.
Because they
considering the CIA was responsible for most of the heroin, cocaine, crack, and you name it, LSD, you name it.
Yeah, that's
because most of that stuff you can't produce it in the United States.
Yeah. And is that the Hegelian dialectic where you create a problem and then you present a solution to it?
Well, that's one of it. I mean, it's more heinous and sinister. The thing about it is what most people don't understand, to be honest with you. It's a lot more sinister, insidious, heinous than people understand. These people, there are some people who do heinous acts, but some people are just heinous. They don't think like most people. See, most people think with a relative moral compass. Even those who are screwed up have a concept of morality. What happens when you completely throw the concept of morality out the window? It's a scary proposition. Most
you
don't
get a
even want to
sociopath
consider
or
it.
psychopath.
Well, for some people, that's how they operate. They don't care. They don't care. They will use human life and life in general as pawns and nothing more, just as if you're playing a game of chess. Most people will say, oh, chess is superior to checkers. No, it isn't. Checkers is more accurate to life. What chess teaches you is to play a battlefield, is to play large armies. Look at how they use the terms pawns, rooks, queens, kings, knights. You protect the king. Strategy games. Why did they teach nobles to play chess? So that they could lead better, right? But lead in a specific type manner. Some pieces are more important than others. So you can send off young men to be cannon fodder and lose them by the thousands and millions, and it doesn't matter, because as long as the objective is met. And then people will think, well, that can't happen on my soil. Oh, yes, it can. What makes you any different?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I've been saying about rigging elections. It's like people say, oh, they wouldn't rig our elections. And it's like the CIA rigs elections in every other country in the world. Why would they not do it to us? Because they have a respect for human decency? Hell no, they don't. They wouldn't be in the FBI or in the CIA if they had a respect for human decency.
Which is its own secret society accountable to literally no one, not even Congress. And it's funny that people talk about rigged elections. They actually do. First of all, anybody ever check how were the candidates that people select even chosen? Nobody wants to ask these questions.
Yeah, well, my theory has been for a long time that basically the same people are in control of the RNC and the DNC. So instead of having to rig the general election, it's much easier to rig two primaries. Because nobody's watching.
Of course.
And I watched them cheat Bernie Sanders, and I also watched him cheat Ron Paul. So that was a Democrat
now,
and a
Ron
Republican.
Paul actually got screwed. Bernie Sanders didn't. See, this is remember I say I keep using the word insidious because I'm finding that more and more because I'm learning as this process going on even more during this year because they're overtly doing stuff. They're not even caring anymore.
Yeah, it's end game for them is what I see. They're like at the win or lose point for them.
Oh no, they've been winning for decades. That's why they don't care.
Is that it?
And they know there's no checks and balances for them, so they don't care. They don't even have to care. Joe Biden's openly admitted to corruption. Hillary Clinton is openly admitted to corruption. Both of them should be in federal prison for at least 25 years. They don't care. And yet Biden has a possibility of becoming president. And who did he select, which we already knew months ago before it was announced? Kamala Harris, which Hillary Clinton, good old Hillary's the worst. Kamala Harris is the worst of the worst.
Yeah, see, I didn't know that was coming. I almost shit myself. We're not actually we're not going out over the airwaves, so I can say shit myself. It's okay. You can say all the words. But But yeah, I was shocked.
Why were you shocked? They told us back in March.
I was
actually she pretty much announced it. Like he already said, "Oh, I'm going to have a female candidate." If you understand how the establishment really works, and no, Donald Trump is not. People think Donald Trump's part of the establishment. No. I said he was going to win back in late 2015, early 2016. People didn't want to. I kept telling people because the problem is he's a wild card. He's a loose cannon. See, he's a Teflon Don. They can't touch him. Everybody thinks just because someone's powerful that means you're part of the establishment. No. That's not how this shit works. There are different groups, different secret societies.
So do you think
not everybody's a part of the same club?
Okay. So do you think that
Dr. Ron Paul was a massive threat? They had to get him on out of here. Donald Trump, they wanted to get him on out of here. Tulsi Gabbard this year was a threat.
Yeah.
They wanted to get her ass on out of there. Why? Because she went against good old Clinton.
Yeah. And the thing that surprised me, and also because you'll note that these are mostly anti-war people. I mean, Trump isn't really anti-war, but he's less pro-war than most. He's not as bloodthirsty as the most of them. And of course, Ron Paul was completely anti-war. Tulsi Gabbard was a little shaky around the edges, but she definitely didn't want as much war as we've had. And it seemed.
It goes deeper than anti-war, though. Dr. Ron Paul was the only candidate at the time talking about not only the military-industrial complex, he was talking about the prison. He's actually the only candidate I've ever voted for.
Really?
It was my first election I wrote in Ron Paul.
No shit.
And I disagreed with a number of his things. At that time, I had become an anarchist. I disagreed with a few of his points. But yes, he's the only candidate, presidential candidate I actually voted for. There's a few others in local elections and stuff that I voted for at the time. But yes, he was the only one.
That's really
He's
interesting.
the only one that talked against the private prison industrial complex. He was the only one talking about the quote-unquote war on drugs, really the war on cannabis. He was the only one actually talking about issues that affected me as a black man, black Americans. The only candidate. Yeah. And he got maligned. He got called racist. He got all this stuff.
Yeah, and the thing that...
See the same tactics on Donald Trump. Regardless if you agree, disagree with him, can't stand him, same stuff happened. Tulsi Gabbard, right? Democrats, you would think progressives would love her. She's a woman of color. She has a different faith. She's a military vet, et cetera, et cetera.
She's beautiful.
Oh, wait, none of them wanted to play ball by the establishment. They're actually all straight shooters. They actually all care about what's right. Some can say Donald Trump doesn't, but regardless, Donald Trump at least cares about the nation and in his mind. We can't be having that.
Do you think Donald Trump is a racist?
I don't. I don't have any evidence. I think what I've been telling people, other people vehemently disagree with me. It is what it is. From whatever I've seen, I only started hearing about this stuff before the election, when he started running. From what I've seen is, like most people I've ever met, he has some biases and prejudices, just like most people.
But you don't see that as his driving force?
No, not at all.
What do you think
look at some of the stuff he's done for black folks. Again, some people don't want to see that, but I'm neutral and objective. I didn't vote for him. I don't support. And in my lifetime, which I'm not that old, but in my lifetime, I've said his administration has been the best administration in my lifetime.
I'm
I
sorry.
don't agree with all of his policies, but people don't like nuance.
Right. Yeah, people don't like nuance. I mean, a lot of people can't understand nuance.
Facts.
Mhm. Um, let's see. So that's actually interesting, and it's interesting to me because it's like, I had I've lost more than one friend over Donald Trump.
Of course.
And the funny thing being, these are people I never supported Donald Trump, but there was one guy, NJ Weedman, who kind of basically I didn't see Trump as being driven by racism. I didn't see that as being his big thing. And this guy who I liked and respected a lot
Yep.
was just like, well, if you can't see that, you must be racist. Next thing you know, I'm blocked. And I'm like, what the fuck just happened?
When most presidents throughout U.S. history have been racist, specifically, the first one I target is Lyndon B. Johnson. The movie Selma did a phenomenal example. Lyndon B. Johnson, the man who passed the Civil Rights Act,
was
an open racist.
Yeah.
Yeah. No one want to talk about that. See, I view racism and racists a lot more specifically.
Mm-hmm. And how's that?
Well, when people talk about, they throw around the word systemic. They don't understand what that really totally entails. It's like a system. It's like if you play football, basketball, or any sport, any team sport, right? The coach draws up plays, right? That's a system. When you're a martial art, an entire fighting system, a system, the foundation of something, how you holistically do something. So when I say with racism, and one of the best things I've also come across, it was back in the 60s, it was an essay, and a gentleman was like, racism is a superficial faith, which I found to be fascinating and accurate. But it's a system, right? I've said this for several years. It didn't matter if nobody in the United States or in the world was racist at this point. Because of the foundations of the system, it wouldn't matter. So how the laws are written, economically, politically, socially, culturally, and more. The way that people think, the psychology towards things, the language that is used is all implicated. It's so subliminal. So most people don't even see it. So until they're the victims of some of the shit.
So I'm struggling a little bit. So are you saying that basically if you made every human colorblind, but you left the laws, you left the institutions, that people of color would still be at a disadvantage in that system?
Oh, absolutely.
And why is
that? And I actually hate the term colorblind.
Okay.
I think that is part of the problem, actually. Because what needs to be recognized is we're different, and it's okay.
Okay.
It needs to be accepted that we're different, and that's okay. Until we get to that point that, men and women are different, and that's okay. Instead of being back and forth and dividing each other, accept that we're different. We each have different skills, talents, attributes, and traits. That's good. Those should be celebrated. Stop this false assimilation. Zach De La Roche, Rage Against the Machine, talked about this 30 years ago, and it still holds true to today.
Interesting.
We're different. It's okay. And grew up in South Florida, and it teaches. And I'm thankful for my parents that I grew up there, because to me, I call it the real America. People say, "Oh, this part's a melting pot." This, no. Literally, we all grew up together. And when you all grow up together, you find out, well, guess what? Oh, my family deals with this. Oh, that family deals with this. Oh, that family deals with this. We all deal with similar issues. Different, but similar. We all bleed red. I can give a blood transfusion. I'm type O. But people don't think like that.
Okay.
They look on these imaginary division lines. I love the show Survivor. You ever watch it?
No, I never did. That's the one where they vote you off the island?
Yes.
Okay, yeah,
I love
heard
it because it is one of the greatest experiments when it comes to sociology, politically, psychologically, philosophically, sociologically. It is phenomenal to just observe. Because the beautiful, amongst so many aspects about it, in order to win, you win individually, but it's how you play the game. There are different ways to win. Each season's different because of different aspects about it, different casts or whatever. But what I love about it is because it strips everything down, right? To where, let's say there's a great alliance going on, a strong alliance, but one of the party members just screws up. Like, there was one season where they dumped a bag of rice and it screwed up the food supply. They had to get that person on out of there. That person was a loose cannon.
Okay.
And what it teaches you is, like, when you strip away all of that, you strip away the sense of wealth, you strip away the sense of what can you do communally and more. As an anarchist, I look at things, I go, everybody's looking at things as they modernly are. I don't. If we were to read, because I keep saying a new alternative system, I look at if things was a post-apocalyptic situation, or if you're scrapping and starting from ground zero,
in the buggy,
how the ancients were. Okay, now let's go. Part of the problem is people are focusing on the modern dynamic. Strip all of that nonsense away, and let's look for solutions.
Okay. So you're an anarchist, or there's the 1,000 flavors of anarchist. I'm an anarcho-capitalist.
Not really. There's more than 10 schools of thought, but there's not 1,000 flavors. Most people aren't anarchists. I openly say that.
Okay. Do you think that most people could be anarchists if they saw anarchy in action? Really?
No, and it's fine that most people aren't. In fact, I wouldn't want most people. Anarchists aren't born, we're created.
Interesting. And what do you think? What do you credit for your having become an anarchist?
Well, I mean, some of it, I do think it is how you're born. I do think that is, like, there are certain tendencies that I notice amongst all anarchists, no matter our differences. But most of the time we just chill. We disagree on minute points, but we chill. Like some similar characteristic traits, if you will. One, like, as soon as we talk, it'll be like certain language you'll use as, like, yeah, you'll know it. It's like if it's like a long lost friend or someone you just meet or someone you haven't seen in a while, it's like it put a smile on your face. We think similarly. We think individually, but communally simultaneously. It's a living paradox, I know, but that's how life really is for a lot of us. A lot of us are freaks. We don't fit inside the norm. We're really social outcasts. We know how to maneuver things. We understand psychology very well, or we pick up on it quickly. Many of us are very versed in philosophy and history. We're educated. Many of us are just regular people.
Thank you for listening to GC.
Sorry about
and so that's kind of what it is. It's just certain set individuals, and it's generally a high level of intelligence. And it's not a egotistical thing. It just is. Not everybody can be an anarchist, nor should they. But anarchists don't. As an anarchist, I'm not trying to push anything on. I've said this. No national borders. If you have a nation, I understand national borders, but no national borders. You should be able to live wherever you want, whether what we call China, Australia, South Africa, the U.S., Canada, Russia, it doesn't really matter. I say this, that each community needs to decide for itself. I don't care if you have a quote-unquote democracy or republic or whatever the situation may be, a king, I don't care. Leadership should be fluid. Part of the problems that you have with states, as an anarchist, it's, I don't want Big Brother. Big Brother's unnecessary. Every man and woman has the ability to logically and rationally think, and as well as morally think. We can critically think. Okay? Each community, I'd say population-wise, it probably shouldn't be over 250,000 because beyond that, you get problems. But should decide for itself. And each generation decides for itself. When you have governments, it's because things become static and the hierarchies no longer become effective. Technologies become stagnant. I'm anti-civilization as well. These things don't help. The ideologies behind these mentalities don't help. We've seen the insane cycle time and time again. And there's more I can get into, but it's pretty simple. If you allow people to do what they're doing, some say, well, what if about a warlord situation or a racist situation? Okay, warlord situation is easy to handle. One community tries some mess, 5 other communities check it. Don't come to that mess with it, or we'll go to war. And that one community is going to die. If that racist, go ahead.
I'm always amused when people say, oh, we can't get rid of the government because warlords would take over. And I'm like, warlords have already taken over. They are the government.
If there's a power vacuum, which is the first thing you'll keep hearing come out of my mouth, don't let there be a power vacuum. Look at the French Revolution.
Okay.
Simple. Already have an alternative system in place. So no anarchist has openly said, "Oh, just bring them together and everything will be fine." No, that's not anarchist talking. That's young fools.
So what would you want to have prepared before the government went? What's your what's your infrastructure that you need?
Well, if you're talking before, first of all, there needs to be an actual economy. I keep saying it. I don't care if it's capitalism, socialism, communism, bartering, something. An actual economy. This is neo-feudalism. There's people say, "Oh, capitalism, that's capitalism." There's never been any of these. None of them.
Yes.
It's neo-feudalism. It's nothing but just larger plantations. Wage slavery took over. Jefferson Davis, the former president of the CSA, the Confederate States of America, was asked, "Oh, what do you think about, as opposed to the factory systems and, all of that industrialism, as opposed to chattel slavery?" He's like, "Oh, it's better for the former, slave owners of chattel slavery, because under chattel slavery, at least you had to feed, you had to clothe, you had to do dental, you had to do all this stuff, right?" He says, with the new system, you can pay them pennies to dig their own graves. That was 120 years ago, 130 years ago.
Wow. I had no idea that quote. I've never read. I've actually read very little about the guys who ran the CSA. Maybe that's something I need to catch up on.
Defend in this. I know I'm a black man. Hold on. I don't agree with obviously all their colleagues, but the Confederates weren't wrong. The funny thing is they were constitutionally backed
on secession.
They wanted states' rights and more. A local rule. They weren't wrong. That's the funny part, that people have this revisionist history. Also, they don't know even that the Constitution almost never got ratified. The group, the anti-ratifiers, the anti-rats. Most people don't study history.
Okay, I've never heard anti-rats before. I've heard anti-federalists, and I've heard federalists.
Oh, anti-ratifiers. Go back to the Constitutional Convention and afterwards. That the reason of the Federalist Papers were in debate between that.
Okay. And what was the big bone of contention there?
Well, there was a lot of bones of contention. One, they had went there initially to, reform the Articles of Confederation, which were a complete mess and a joke in a lot of cases. There's that. So some viewed it as that. Some didn't like this new federalist structure that was being proposed, even though it had its pros as well as its cons. Some of them believed that their states should be relatively independent, although they were a nation. And there is more to it. Some of them just disagreed with the proposals. There were a lot of varying reasons as to why that is. But that's just how it is, as with most things. Most people who claim that they support the country, y'all can't believe you're talking against the Constitution. They don't even know the Constitution. They don't even know the Declaration of Independence. One of the things you're asking as to how I became an anarchist, the Declaration of Independence was one. My faith as a Christ follower was another one. Guy in the name of Noam Chomsky was one of them. Actually, one of the biggest reasons was studying about Vietnam, the Vietnam conflict.
Really?
Was a huge one.
What was it about that?
Huge one.
How did that affect you, Vietnam?
Well, it was understanding. See, in the past, before, you could say, oh, the Korean conflict, there hasn't been an actual war since World War II in the United States. They've all just been conflicts. They haven't actually been war. And people say, but people bullish will fight. That doesn't make it a war.
Right. It's not
doesn't
declared.
actually make it a war.
Okay.
And it isn't even just a declaration of Congress not making it a war.
Okay.
It's the objectives. See, when it comes to war, whether it be economically, politically, militaristically, or otherwise, business, there are clear objectives. When it comes to Nam, the way that they conducted it was complete and utter nonsense. It was complete bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
They would take a hill. They would fight for 3 days. Men would give up their lives on both sides. And then they were like, well, guys, we got to pack up and go. That's not how wars are fought. They couldn't cross over into Laos, however you want to say it, right?
Uh-huh.
They were protecting rubber factories. Wait, what? They're out here protecting because of opium. They're out here. The way that things were conducted was terrible. They sent in, for example, earlier on in the conflict, the U.S. used jets.
Uh-huh.
Instead of having dogfighting capability with machine guns, we have the superior technology. Terrible. When it comes to the troops, right?
Mm-hmm.
In antiquity, there were war cultures, meaning young men were trained. They were trained mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually to be able to handle things.
Uh-huh.
In World War I and World War II, yes, some men dealt with shell shock and such, but you didn't have soldiers coming back home, Marines, sailors, and more coming back home for the most part with PTSD. They were using chemical warfare too. With Nam, you started seeing the spike in that. Why? Because here's the thing. There was actual training. In Nam, they would train them, quote unquote, for 2 weeks. Send these young men sometimes from the inner cities, from very urban areas, from the cornfields of Nebraska and Kansas, from the swamps, you name it, and drop them in the jungle. Have you ever been to a jungle?
I have not.
Been to Costa Rica. Let me tell you something. I understand partially why the ancients viewed the way that they viewed the world.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're in a forest or in a jungle at night, you hear all these sounds. And it's just completely foreign. Some of these guys had never probably been outside their cities or towns. And yet you draw them into one of the most hostile, just natural environments. Let alone they're in a war zone. In guerrilla warfare, this isn't conventional warfare, which is another point. They didn't know. Sun Tzu's The Art of War teaches us, you know the environment. You do reconnaissance. There was no reconnaissance. You were sending young men in. Another big thing is they didn't know why they were fighting. World War II, there was a clear enemy. They knew what they were fighting. There was an ideology. Even Black Americans who were oppressed knew what the fuck they were fighting for, right? These young men had no idea what they were fighting for. They were untrained. They're using these devices on them. They had them send missions to kill children in some cases, partially because some of them had bombs and such. That stuff affects. And not only that, back in the past, you had time to decompress, the boat rides home and more. They would pick these young men out of active war zones and send them on a plane or a helicopter, and within 2 days, they would be back in the United States, and we expect them to be civilian situations. The fact that we don't have more Rambo situations is a godsend.
Yeah.
And that's what's
Although
been
Rambo
done
was
for the
actually
last
right.
40, 50 years.
No
war culture. How much of the pacifization, the civilized, the pussification, don't teach youngins how to fight? Don't teach them the martial arts.
Uh-huh.
I remember being in school, you almost don't even have a right to defend yourself. The fuck is that?
Yeah. Yeah, it makes me think of Malcolm X saying, that it's a crime to teach people not to defend themselves when they are victims of constant attack or subjects of constant attack, I think he said.
But just any
I apologize
attack.
for
You should be, and I include this with women, girls, everyone should know self-defense.
That's part of my
what
religion,
it does with the martial arts, and I constantly say this, and I get on the heads of police departments and more that are untrained.
Mm-hmm.
People, I'm in fear of my life. Here's the thing. If you actually have proper training, right? Now, the military dudes who get involved with law enforcement, if that's what you want to call it, they don't be doing this dumb shit. Why? Because they actually have training. If you understand the martial arts, you learn discipline, self-control,
Mm-hmm.
Most martial artists, they're not the ones getting into fights.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I found
Partially
I was much
because
less
they know what
likely.
they can do to another person.
Yeah.
With gun training, you don't just draw your weapon. You don't have misfirings. You actually know to do it. And if you're going to shoot, you can shoot precisely to disarm somebody or to kill lethally.
Mm-hmm. Are you a gun person?
I advocate. I don't currently possess a firearm.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't bought one. I have no problems with them at all.
Yeah. Yeah, my
When
only
you
problem
disarm the
with them is
populace,
I'm a
that's the
felon.
first step towards tyranny. Part of the reason why you even had a Second Amendment written up, because they understood it. To defend yourself against people. Oh, you shouldn't have access to fully automatic or semi-automatic weapons. If the American revolutionaries didn't have access to similar artillery, how the hell you think they even stood a chance against the most powerful military on the face of the planet at the time?
Right? Yeah, I'm right there with you on that.
The same thing in the South.
Mm-hmm.
When the South seceded, and some parts of the West too.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. It's amazing to me how few leftists, even Marxists, know what Marx had to say about guns. You know, do you know the quote?
Well, Marx was part of the bourgeois himself, so.
Yeah. But do you know the quote I'm talking about? Marx on guns. He had.
What did he say?
Actually, I'm currently searching for it because I don't have it memorized.
Well, he was part of the 19th century, so he understood. I one of the quick phrases I've used with some of the folks on the ground. I said, "Y'all out here trying to play in the 21st century." I said, "We need to use 19th century tactics."
Uh-huh. Okay,
I'm
sorry. Come again with that?
Work today.
I didn't entirely catch what you said there.
Oh, I said it worked for them then. It should work for us today. 19th century tactic.
Huh.
It worked.
Interesting. So how would you like do you think there's something they could? Oh, okay. Here's the Marx quote I was looking for. Under no pretext should arms and ammunition be surrendered. Any attempt to disarm the workers must be frustrated by force if necessary. And you would be amazed how many gun-grabbing socialists have said to me, Marx said that? Marx was a gun guy?
Because they're not socialists or communists.
Mm-hmm. What are they?
And Marx isn't the end-all, be-all. This is what I'm saying. People throw around terms and phrases too much.
Mm-hmm.
Every single socialist, communist, and anarchist I've ever heard, many of us, we don't openly carry shit on a regular. All of us are completely fine. See, the thing, especially with anarchists, we're neutral. Mm-hmm. We would rather peaceful solutions be had. Absolutely. But when it comes to actually being about that smoke and that static, we'll be, like myself, we'll be the first on the front line to actually do what needs to be done. It's not a moral issue for us. Moral is injustice, inequality, etc. is being done.
Okay. Now, when you say inequality, what do you mean?
Well, okay. Let's take it back to childhood, right? Because even children understand it. Adults love to play these games, right? These ridiculous games. When a child has something, let's say you have like two kids, the three kids. Let's say there's three kids, right? Like three siblings. Let's say mommy and daddy were giving them some candy, right? One child gets 7, the other gets 4, the other gets 3.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they might not be the most intelligent of kids, but I'm pretty sure that the child with 4, he'd be like, "This is okay. You know, I'd rather have that 7, but I'm okay." But that one with 3 go, "Wait a minute. Mm-hmm. Why does Billy and Joey get more than me?"
Mm-hmm.
That's inequality.
Okay.
I mean, it's very simplistic, but that's inequality. So what is the answer to that question? Why does Billy and Joey? Now, if you want to give the question out, let's say they actually did a task and Billy and Joey were compensated properly for their contributions. Well, then you can explain that to little Sammy, and Sammy's like, okay, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Or like, et cetera. Okay, that makes sense. But if you're just doling it out, little Sammy has a point, right? Because that's an equal.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
See, people make this out to be so much more difficult. I mean, it is a little bit more complex than that. But when it comes down to a lot of these issues, that's where it comes down to. I'm not asking. Most people are not asking for handouts. We're asking for equal opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Declaration of Independence. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political events. And I continue with the first paragraph, but we hold these truths to be self-evident.
That all men are created equal.
I slow those phrases down because people really do not understand the gravity of what he's saying. We hold these truths. These things that are based, and if you understand the Enlightenment and Freemason thinking, truths. These are concepts that are based on absolutes and universals. To be self-evident, these are things that are obvious. That all men are created equal. That they are endowed, they are given by their Creator, certain unalienable rights. That among these, this isn't limited to. And initially, like the French said, property, but Ben Franklin's like, nah, you don't want to say that. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Was it Franklin who said not property? That's interesting.
He kind of encouraged Tommy Jefferson to change that up. Yeah.
Interesting, because I always thought that was a bad change. I liked life, liberty, and property.
No, I love the change, and I'll explain why I love the change.
Okay, groovy. Let's hear it.
Life. Let's start with that. If you don't have life, you have nothing.
Well,
simple.
You don't even have you.
If you don't have the right to life, and that's one of the things that these pro-choice people be killing me with, because y'all playing this funky game with me. Is that not a living creature? Is that as long as I know that's not going to come out as a dog, a reptile, a cow. As far as I know, it takes a human sperm and a few human ova. Basic biology 101 creates a human child, right?
Right.
That's what biology teaches me, right? Now, if I can semi understand the case of rape. There are many ways of contraception.
Yeah.
Plenty of us have had sex and haven't produced kids. So there are plenty of ways to not have kids.
Yeah.
But then, as soon as the baby pops out, it's criminal negligence, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So y'all are picking and choosing God.
Right.
Is euthanasia okay? Like, what determines life? The value of life. All life should be valued. And it's funny that some people are so quick with that issue, but any plants or any animals, they'll damn near want to kill somebody over. I just find that funny to me.
Yeah, an animal rights activist is pro-choice.
Yeah, that makes no sense to me. That completely is hypocritical.
That's interesting. See, my view on abortion, I've got a political view, but I've also got a religious view. My political view is that anything that the government fucks with will get worse. So I don't believe in abortion laws. At the same time, as a minister, if somebody came to me and said, I'm thinking of aborting my child, basically what I would lay out for that person is that what you should do then is put yourself in the position of that child and say to yourself, if you were dealt this hand, would you want to play it? Or would you want to abort it and hopefully, catch the next fetus out, more or less? And so, for example, if a child is going to be born with no arms, no legs, and half a brain and live 5 years, then I might, if that was my child, I might well say, I don't want my child to go through a life that's nothing but pain.
Yeah, if it's a medical emergency, that's especially to both the mother and the child, I get that. If it's a situation where it's a stillborn child, I get it. But here's the thing. Isn't there such a thing called miscarriages?
Oh, yeah.
I I could have sworn that's natural abortion. What people need to understand what language is. What does the term abort mean, sir?
It means to cut off before fruition.
To terminate.
Yeah.
Just like the movie The Terminator. Ought to be boxed.
Yeah.
To terminate. Let's stop mincing words. Oh, make it into a fetus. I don't care what you call it. It is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I don't play these games. People are, oh, you play semantics. No, words have value because people don't understand about language. Language is about association, and under each form of association, there are concepts, and under each concept, there are ideologies and philosophies that back these. People don't get that. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier about the whole thing with systemic search in language, because what it does is it messes with you psychologically and mainly subconsciously, and it affects. And I don't want this to come across as a sexist attack, but it affects women more than it does men. It affects men, but it affects women. How do I know this? Because I deal with it. For example, men make decisions. But men are more objective, most of us anyways. There are some bums, we know that. But men are more objective and purpose-oriented and driven, just how we're wired.
Right. Whereas,
if you look at male-centric media versus female-centric media, I ask people this question. What's the difference between male-centric media and female-centric media?
Well, for me, I would say that female-centric media, I'm especially thinking of things like soap operas. They're all about solving emotional problems between people.
Relational. You're correct.
Right. Whereas male stuff tends to be about find the crook, blow up the bridge. It's logical. It's
simpler than that, actually.
Okay.
It's objective based. If I'm reading a golf magazine, it's about golf. A men's health magazine is about men's health. It might mention sexual stuff and sexual reproductive stuff, right? If I'm reading a boxing magazine, if I'm watching a whatever the show's about, it's directly Sons of Anarchy. And it's funny how the female characters most of the time are better in male-centric stuff, as well as women tend to love more male-centric media. The shonen genre in anime and manga is the highest selling of the demographic of all that kind of entertainment. Now, it's supposed to be geared towards young boys, but both males and females are heavily into it. I find that funny, interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Including there are some female authors and mangaka who do that. Why? Because male-centric stuff focuses on objectives. And when you can do that, then you can get into the ideological battles, concepts such as freedom, justice, equality, et cetera, government, politics, you name it, right? Soap operas. I'm not saying soap operas can't be fun and good to look at or can teach you something, but they're pretty limited in their scope.
Yeah.
Something like Cosmo and Cosmopolitan is pretty limited in its source material, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I'm not hating on women. I just noticed these things. Women will say, "Oh, the patriarchy." It's funny because historically, the patriarchy, quote unquote, it was established by women. Nobody wants to talk about this, though.
Yes, I do.
I know you do. By and large, nobody wants to talk about that. There's a book called Chimpanzee Politics, and it was a group of chimps in captivity. But it was interesting. The females were the ones, and most people don't understand how power really works, right? So the female chimps were the ones really running it. But did you know what they did? They put a male figurehead.
Yeah.
Most of household incomes are spent by whom? If you're talking about husband and wife.
Spending is usually going to be the female.
90%.
In a traditional family.
Yeah, 90%. Who files for divorces most of the time?
I would definitely, that's got to be women.
80% of the time.
80%.
This isn't me hating on women. I love women. No. I'm just talking about
and
the
what
facts.
You're saying isn't bad. It's just statistics. I don't take any bad reflection off that.
I think these things are bad in some cases, like the divorce rate, but they're bad because people are understanding why they're happening. And
yeah, see,
so it goes back
that,
to the point I said about the subconscious, the
mhm.
subliminal messaging that's being done. The subliminal messaging is being done towards men as well. People are like, oh, but the media, the mainstream media attacks women. It attacks men too. Ever check anything like He-Man, the different cartoons?
Oh yeah, talk about some unrealistic body image. Yeah.
Yep, men get it too. We just don't care as much.
Right.
We'll be like, oh, bro, nice muscles. Women will compare each other. Women, and women. So a lot of women are starting to come out and say, women, why do women wear makeup for? Honestly,
I would say for themselves and for other women more than men.
Thank you.
Most of the time they're not looking for somebody to hit on them, unless they're feeling blue and they want to get a boost of self-esteem. You know.
Yeah, some of them might do it to look good. You know, that even though maybe they do it for themselves, but most of the time it's the second point that you made. They do it for other women. It's the women even come out and say it's the truth.
Yeah.
Because it's how women are wired differently from men. And it's not a bad thing, but we need to recognize this is what it is and stop playing these games that we don't know that there are differences between men and women. From an anatomical standpoint, as a man, I can't have kids. I need a woman to have kids. It's just what it is. Nature, Mother Nature itself is sexist. She's sexist.
Sure. Well, sexist or I mean, things are just different. It's like people talk about age of consent, and I say, well, you know, I lost my virginity at 13, and I don't feel in the least bit like I was raped. But that's boys and girls aren't the same. You know?
I disagree with that on this aspect.
Okay.
If it was, I'm not promoting this, but if it was two youngsters doing that, it's different. But if it's a grown man or grown woman molesting or raping a child, that is wrong. Well, period.
See, molesting and raping is definitely wrong. My situation was I had been seeking sex for a couple of years before I met Denise. Denise was 23, and I went to a hell of a lot of effort.
It's nothing. A 23-year-old, I've been there with a youngin'. I ain't touching no 13-year-old. Hell no.
No, more.
Hell no. You could. I don't even want to call it cultural. Like here, from an adult standpoint, thinking as an adult, what the hell I'm doing with a 13-year-old? What can a 13-year-old offer me? Let's say that 13-year-old gets pregnant, or let's say in your case, the 23-year-old gets pregnant. You can't work. You can't provide for the child. You can't really take care of the child. You can't.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
Definitely true. Definitely true. But
ain't nobody going to acknowledge any kind of marriage situation. See, I look at these. Forget just the moral aspect of it. Look from a practical aspect of it, which is people don't want to look at that either. You're not. I'm not saying people can't. Yes, just because you can't have, but from a psychological standpoint, a mental and emotional standpoint, is really anybody ready at sex at 13? Really? How much life experience do you really have by 13?
Yeah, see, I didn't have that much. The reason that I don't consider myself to have been victimized, or part of the reason is, you know, she probably had an IQ of 100. I had an IQ of 146. And so
there you go.
It was the balance was different. When I talked to my girls, when I talked to girls my own age, they didn't know what the fuck I was talking about, and I didn't know what the fuck they were talking about. So that's.
Well, no, I can't relate to that part. I can understand people of different intellectual capacities. So.
Well, I'm sure you can, because you must have had the same issues growing up, because you've got a hell of a brain on you. But. Wow. Okay. Now, were you in? Let me shift gears a little bit, because there's a bunch of different things.
I mentioned about ANCAP stuff. I'll definitely talk on that.
Okay. At some point I do, but actually I wanted to find out: were you at any of these autonomous zones that got set up in your? I was a part of
CHOP. I was heavily involved with CHOP.
You were in the CHOP.
In fact, with
okay.
the different shootings, I was intimately involved with those. Yes.
Okay. You were involved with shootings? Who'd you shoot?
When the different shooting deaths that occurred, I was
okay.
intimately involved with them. Yes.
Okay.
And the first one still, I'm still dealing with that one.
How many of
It
those
didn't
were
have to
there?
occur.
How many deaths were there?
Two. There were two. Just two young men.
Okay.
You'll hear these reports that were 4 or 5. There might have been a third, but I've never got that confirmed. But there was two definitive deaths that I am fully aware of.
Now, is that higher than the normal rate of homicide that you'd have for that
Bullshit.
area and that population?
This notion that there were so many deaths, there was no. First of all, those were outside of CHOP. They did not occur inside.
Uh-huh.
Understand that CHOP was a 1 to 3 block radius.
Right.
By the way, we did this notion that we locked things down. No, we couldn't have locked things down. We were working with the city. We had residential support, communal support. Guess what? If this was an active war zone, right?
Uh-huh.
Do parents bring their kids to walk through an active war zone?
Very rarely. I've seen mothers walking with kids through a riot.
An active war zone, just scroll through.
I sure as shit wouldn't.
Do elderly and just regular people and people from all across the world, do they just do an average stroll down the street?
Not generally.
Let me tell you about something. The borders that were stated. This is where I'm talking about the heinous, the insidious nature that even the mainstream media, and not even just them, that they were talking about Chaz. First of all, that whole Chaz moniker was not of the people, right? That was put on it. Secondly, it's just funny. Autonomous zone. None of us ever adopted that, right? The reality of the situation was, and we were actually protecting the involuntary homeless population.
Uh-huh.
We were feeding people.
Mm-hmm.
You were talking about stuff that I was doing. I was running security. Not running security, but I was a part of it. And it was doing things solo, but it was cool with a lot of people. A lot of people had family and community for the first time in their lives, openly admitted. We were dealing with mentally disabled people. We were literally getting all of there was some substance usage, as you know, it just happens. But a lot of the stuff that is rampant around was pushed outside. We did not have junk happening on a consistent basis.
You didn't have drugs?
The thing about CHOP, here's a 1 to 3 block radius, not even the entire neighborhood by any stretch of the imagination. Mm-hmm. It had national and international media. I gave reports. I talked to some folks, and some of us talked to people across the world. I gave different reports to different ones in different interviews. In fact, I think AT, the Associated Press, I was one of the people they took pics from. And I know that because a lady asked for my name. I only gave Daniel P. It's just fascinating. The lies that folks love to spin. And all this stuff that no one was actually there. Oh, but streamers were there. They were barely there. At that time, I was also working mainly. And I would come off of work, be up all night and more. Eventually I got sick and I stopped. But things were peaceful. The day before CHOP got raided at 4 to 6 in the morning, the day CHOP gets raided, everything was peaceful. I left at 4 in the afternoon. I was smiles. Everything was good. The next morning, when myself and others that they knew who were the strong protective types who wouldn't allow for stuff. It was July 1st. They came in and did a military raid. And it's funny. They said, oh, we occupied and we locked things down. No, we didn't. Mm-hmm. Everything that was done, all those barriers and whatever, that was the Department of Transportation and the City of Seattle's property that they dropped at our doorstep. We just repurposed it.
Uh-huh.
After they moved us out, you know what the police did? Literally quarantined an entire section of the city.
Really? Why?
Including the park. They shut down the park for 3 to 5 days.
Because of COVID?
The police department. Everything they said they were obstructing. Everything. This is what they do. They say we do this. They actually do it. And if you talk to any citizens on Capitol Hill, any people who are actually in the area, they'll tell you the exact same thing I'm saying. It was like checkpoint shit. They had it blocked off. And there's more that I could say, but this is what they do.
How did you get the cops out?
We didn't.
They just left?
They quote unquote left. They remained. There were some cops that remained in the precinct. Remember that point I told you that they didn't protect businesses? They didn't help protect lives? Yeah.
Uh-huh.
We didn't. No. Yeah, they pulled out themselves. Nobody asked them. We didn't.
See,
nope.
That was my impression. My impression was that there was no way that you could have forced that police department out of there without guns. And I didn't see you guys bristling with guns. You know how the case is? Because
for 2 nights, about 3 nights ago now, there was about 20 of us out there, literally as peaceful as you can get.
Mm-hmm.
And the cops came up, rolled up on us 15 squad cars deep. We were, when I say doing nothing, I mean legitimately nothing.
Mm-hmm. Wow. See, okay. Well, that makes it clear to me, or at least it clears a lot of things up. So I really appreciate that.
I just want to know where people was getting this information from. But that's the thing; it was not from the people on the ground. It wasn't from people like myself and others. Yeah. And there's a number of people. Oh, I was there. I would have seen you. Other people I know would have seen you.
Well,
there's a lot of friends I made throughout these last 3 months. They didn't know before.
Everything that we've talked about, like we talked about the elections, Ron Paul, we talked about Tulsi Gabbard. Now, the notable thing there, and the same thing's happening to Joe Jorgensen right now.
I've heard about Jorgensen from some people. I don't know much about that individual.
Well, I don't know much about her as a person, and it doesn't matter that much to me because she's not going to win. It's important to me to get 10 or 15% of the vote is my goal. Just so maybe we get taken seriously next time. But, the media completely shut all of those people down, even though they were the most interesting people in the races, just because they were the only ones saying anything new. And so the media should have been all over them, and they shut them down. And my theory is that that's intentional. It's the same thing that's happening in terms of the propaganda that they put out based loosely on the story of what was really going on in the chops, which is all of the media licenses are held by 6 corporations.
This is how bad it was when I say it wasn't even loose, right?
Uh-huh.
There was a Seattle Times report that was given about shooting, right? Uh-huh. And again, I was there involved, and understand this was 2 days. This was still an active situation. In fact, I was still multiple days after the event, the first one, I was answering calls from a detective, okay, about the incident, right? Because I had given a report at the hospital, which I could tell all what happened. But anyways, the fact is the article, and there was supposedly 3 different writers, right?
Uh-huh. So
many lies. When Donald Trump and others talk about fake news, and I'm glad he called it out because it's true. There's only been a few articles in my life where I've gotten that infuriated. One actually dealt with one of my older brothers, and just lies that were said about him in an article.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like how they report on these legal proceedings. When none of the evidence has even come out yet, how can you even make this stuff? Like, who did you talk to? You see what I'm saying? Like, who do these people talk to? How can you report on something when you've never actually been on the ground and gotten reports from the people?
You seen
when
V for
the police
Vendetta?
Haven't even done an investigation.
Have you seen V for Vendetta?
Of course. And I have the comment. Come on now.
Our job is to report the news, not to fabricate it. That's the government's job.
But the job of journalism, see, there's been a death of journalism.
There is no journalism.
Objectivity and facts. Even JFK talked about this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, secrecy is aberrant to a free society, he said.
But he also talked about the job. That was the reason I sent that video. Yes, he talks about secret societies, but he also was talking about the job of the press, not to just fraudulent misinformation kills people. It kills people. That's not hyperbole. That's facts.
Sure.
I've seen it happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, That's the primary cause of death of mankind is being wrong at the wrong time.
Facts.
You know, and that's why it's so important. Like the mask thing. You know, what's your position on masks?
I don't wear them unless I'm going to an establishment that requires it. I don't wear them.
Okay. I don't even wear them.
Number one, people don't understand what these masks are for. First of all, for the protection, no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Surgical mask, you're only supposed to really wear them like one time, but these masks, you can't breathe. There's carbon dioxide issues. Dr. Ron Paul actually came out and did a video on about the mask nonsense as well, by the way, on his channel.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been saying it. They're not built to protect you. And people, but the droplets, there hasn't been any. I know about viruses. I'm not a virologist, but I study shit. And so I study all kinds of fields. Here's the thing about viruses. They are living but not living because they don't have DNA. They just have RNA. Okay? So they need living hosts, right? Like parasites. The thing about it is, how do you know that just breathing it in or in that? We have so many pores on our body. Our largest organ is our what?
Skin.
Viruses work at the nanoscopic, if not smaller level.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, but just the droplets and the different. Oh, that's nonsense. That's bullshit. And this is the biggest thing about it for me. We have millions upon millions of viruses annually. No one gives a damn. The stuff that they were saying is the things people should have been doing. You're supposed to clean areas. You're supposed to wash your hands. You're supposed to do stuff to keep yourself safe. But here's the thing. There's a time frame. If they were going to lock things down, it should have happened back in January for 2 weeks to a month.
Right.
I started hearing about stuff back in November and December. And they were calling Trump and different ones racist and xenophobic. No. I also knew after a certain point, it's like an ink blot in a petri dish. It disperses. And they kept locking things down. I'm like, okay, this is about power and control. It's not about keeping people healthy and safety.
Thank you.
Then they had grocery stores and more open. I said, I and others have been outside. I've also been involuntary homeless, so I know how to deal with sickness and illness. The thing is, I already knew that being outside in the open actually keeps you healthier, not sicker. Being in an enclosed area with breathing the same air makes you sicker, which is what they found out. And the CDC, with its crooked numbers, is even coming out and saying the same shit I already knew, and I was already talking about it. The old and the young, those with compromised systems were the ones at threat. Lo and behold, what do we find out? Those who are 78 and above, the ones who are most likely to die, were dying. Duh. Mm-hmm. People around my age don't. Now, if you're around children and elderly, I can understand that. But for the rest of us, no, this was lunacy.
But children have no death rate from this stuff. Children don't die from it at all.
From what we found out. But I was saying if you're going to be protective, those are the ones that you protect with. And not just children, really babies. Mm-hmm. Really babies. But this is just, we're the actual facts, which we knew things were fabricated. We're the actual numbers of this actually killing people and not helping to kill people. That's a huge thing for me.
Yeah, and the answer is we'll never know what really happened.
Of course we won't, because they can't know, because this is a new virus, and then it will constantly evolve. Mm-hmm. You can't know.
Do you think it was engineered?
Even if you believe in vaccines, it'll take, if it was a rush one, it would take a year. Vaccines take like 3 years to produce, and that's with nose to the grindstone. People don't have, this is what I'm talking about, ignorance. If this was the 1930s and we just had radio, do you think things would have been locked down?
Oh, absolutely not. Even 1969, I think.
Thank you.
The year of Woodstock. They had a huge fucking pandemic going on. Nobody gave a shit. They just did their thing.
But it's not a pandemic.
Or
that's what
epidemic.
People don't understand about these terms. They're throwing around these terms and it freaks people out, but they don't even know what they mean.
Well, they redefined the fucking thing also. They redefined pandemic specifically to make it fit this.
Well, yeah. Pandemic and epidemics have the definitive. If this was an actual global pandemic, it didn't matter what we did. We were screwed.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't mean all the population is going to die, but you're going to lose 6 to 20% of the population. It doesn't matter what you do, because that's just what's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I would absolutely Agree with that. And it's been, it's so surreal that I see so many people who are actually scared. And I'm like, you realize that if you get this shit, 199 out of 200 people who get it are going to live. And you're not going to be that one probably unless you're old or unless you're broken in some way,
You remember you asking me about, can people become anarchists? And I said most people can't.
Mm-hmm.
This is Exhibit A as to why. And it actually goes back to one thing I love to say is that even because I remember at 18 years old, before I became an anarchist, at 18, I did it was English Comp 1, and I did a paper, and I said, issues like the 5 issues with democracy that I had. Mob rule is one of the biggest ones, but is really the biggest one. But the issue with it is I'd rather a true republic or an anarchy. Okay. Now, in order to have a true republic, though, you need a well-informed, educated, involved, or engaged voter population.
Yes.
See, that's the problem, though.
The society that seeks to be ignorant and free seeks what never was and what never will be. I don't even know who said that. But
it can. See, that's the problem. It can. But you need an educated. But what does it mean to be educated? Not indoctrinated, program, and brainwash, which this quote-unquote education system does.
Right.
Educated means it teaches you how to think. Pretty much it teaches you to think about things, just like philosophy. That's what education does. To be truly educated on, let's say, not just teaching somebody how to throw a punch, but why to throw a punch and in what scenarios to throw a punch. That's education.
Mm-hmm.
Education, if you're, I come from sport. I love sports, and it taught me so much, as well as the martial arts. I love talking about fighting and more.
What did you study? What style?
Sports, or you can say mathematics. Why do you use a certain formula when? I remember they just taught us the quadratic formula, and I'm like, okay, but why? And then they broke it down as to how they derived from it and when to use it. I'm like, good, thank you. When they taught us that, and this was years down the line after learning fractions, I'm like, there's got to be more to this. And when they said fractions are, one teacher was like, fractions are pretty much a division problem. I'm like, oh, you've just opened up the whole world to me. Why don't you just tell me this years ago?
Yeah, and
for me, the whys matter so much. People don't ask the whys though, just like they don't care about nuance.
Well, I'll tell you what. I've got a why for you right now, which is I gotta let you go because I've got an appointment in 10 minutes on the town common to drink beer. We go out every Friday night. Ever since the lockdown started, every Friday night we go out and drink beer on the town common, which is of course illegal, and watch the cops ignore us. But anyway, I want to do this like another 20 times. So let's try and set up. I don't know if it'll be Friday or it'll be other nights, but we'll talk online and set some of this up. Thanks so much. I have enjoyed the hell out of this. Usually I do a lot more talking, and I have just been fascinated listening to you. And it's we definitely going to do this shit again, bro. You down? All right. All right, man. Well, hey, I will be back in touch with you probably on Facebook if you're up when I get back from the party. And thanks so much again, man.
I'm on West Coast time, so I'm PST. So
yeah, you're earlier. It's midnight here, almost. All right, talk to you later, my brother.
All right.
Peace.
I gotta say that was really outstanding.
Thank you.
Really interesting.
Yeah, and wow.
He's really smart, too.
He's fucking brilliant. I was like, I gotta interview this dude.
I'm going to take you out here with a new song from Van Morrison. His new protest song
just
came out today. It's called Born to Be Free.
Yeehaw! Well, this has been Nobody Tells the Truth. I haven't been telling the truth, but I think some was delivered. And I'll see you next week. Well, before.
In the trees, know something we can't see, 'cause they know we were born to be free. Don't need the government cramping my style. Give them an inch, they take a mile, take you in with a phony smile. Wouldn't you agree? The new normal is not normal. It's no kind of normal at all. Everyone seems to have amnesia, just trying to remember the Berlin Wall. Some kind of new old ideology, a weird new psychology, but it's not for the benefit of you and me. No, no, no. New normal is not normal. It's no kind of normal at all. Everyone seems to have amnesia, trying to remember. But the Berlin Wall is some kind of new old ideology, running tandem with a weird kind of psychology. But it's not for the benefit of you and me. 'Cause we were born to be free. 'Cause we were born to be free. Because we were born to be free.